Well, hello. Welcome to another episode of Church Leadership Lab. We are glad to be with you. Our goal here is to have conversations that empower healthy churches. And so we're excited for another one of those today with Nils Smith. After serving in full-time ministry for over a decade, Nils began supporting ministries, nonprofits, small businesses as a digital marketing and ministry consultant. And he's been involved in a number of tech startups, partners with a few different organizations now, including Amplify Social Media, which he founded. He lives in New York City with his wife, 15 years, Katie. They're two girls, and we are super excited, Nils, to have you on the show. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that we like to start off with, I know that there's the public bio and the thing that's sort of some of the highlights that are there, but everybody has some things that don't maybe make the public bio that all your friends and family would know about you. So for you, what would that be?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'd say probably I'm a sports guy, so I grew up in Texas. So I think people know me from being in New York, as we've lived here for about a decade. And we love New York City, but grew up a Houstonian. So I'm a Houston Astros guy, Houston Texans football fan. And then I transferred to San Antonio. My ministry was primarily in San Antonio, Texas, and became a Spurs fan. So I'm a sports guy at heart. And then with that, God gave me two daughters who neither one of them care about sports. So I am a girl dad. And so I am all in on I got a couple theater girls, and I've never done theater, music, dance, any of that. It's all my wife. But I am all in on theater support, dad at home.
Yeah. Hey, I love that. I have two girls as well, and they're just taking their first steps in theater. So they did
nice
theater camp last year, and the whole thing, and performed. And I found I was so nervous and similar. So I grew up playing sports, love sports, huge Chicago sports fan, all that. But I was so nervous watching them perform their theater production. It's it's not easy going as a theater dad.
No, and you can't control it. I mean, I guess it's what my parents felt when I was up, hitting, as a baseball player growing up, when I went up there. But but I think that the experience that the kids get of getting on stage and doing all the things, it's really cool. So I wanted a boy so bad, but I love being a girl dad and the relationship there. And I wouldn't even know what to do with a boy now. So we're done. My wife made it very clear after two that we were not going to try for a boy on number three. Nice.
Well, other than talking about our nerves during our daughter's theater productions, we are going to kind of center our conversation around talking about digital presence for churches, social media, but really what it looks like to kind of show up digitally. And I know that one of the things that happened, in 2020, which is crazy now that it's 3 years ago. But one of the things that happened was churches really needed to increase that digital presence in a hurry. It was, it wasn't really a choice. It wasn't the luxury of thinking through kind of what's best, but it was, what can we do by next Sunday? As a result, it was just get something up that's going to work. But that doesn't always lead to kind of the best results. So for you, as you've worked with churches, consulted with, and then just seen a lot of the kind of patterns, what are some of the mistakes that you've seen when it comes to a church's digital presence?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think back to, my background in ministry, a lot of it was in digital ministry. And so we started onlinechurch.com back in 2010 when there's this new website, facebook.com, that we're like, I think there's this social media thing might catch on. And it's been fun to watch it grow. But I think back then it was heretical to go online. And then, in 2020, it became essential to go online. And I think it's been an interesting journey. But I think one of the things that we leaned into early in 2010 that differentiated us and really led to pretty significant ministry success was that we saw social media as a ministry platform first, then a marketing platform second. And so I think the big mistake that I see ministries making is when they use social media, digital media, in general, that they're thinking marketing 100%, and they're not thinking ministry. And I think we don't have to wait till somebody comes into our building to minister to them. We can actually begin that ministry process. And actually, before we even go to a restaurant, you're typically going to check it out on Yelp. You're going to see what other people had to say about it. People are going to check you out online before they come to your church and commit their time and their presence to a physical worship experience. So I think really prioritizing how can we minister to somebody before they come is the big opportunity. And I think it's also the big mistake that people are making, because they basically just like posting on social media, come to church, rather than like, here's a message and we'd love for you to join us. But let me minister to you first and then invite you second. And I think that just very simple approach sees much greater fruitfulness. And so I think it's a mindset of ministry and then marketing, rather than marketing so that we can minister to you.
Yeah. Well, I think too, when you think about it, how many people who are hurting, who have needs, who are at a point in life where they realize, listen, what I've been doing has not been working.
Yes.
I mean, how many of us now like start to look for answers online, like that? Yeah. And I get 28, 25, 30 years ago, maybe that wasn't the case. It definitely wasn't the case, but that's where we're at now. And the reality is, like, if that's where people are starting that search, to be able to do our best to meet them there in that place can be really powerful. Then to be that voice to say, hey, actually we have some hope for you, in what we think of, the way of Jesus. So
yeah,
absolutely. One thing that you said that I found interesting, as you were answering that question, you made a comment like what we thought was heretical in like 2010 was essential in 2020.
Yes.
And honestly, what it made me think of is how we have a tendency in the church to get so married to methods and so married to, whatever it is. Maybe it's an overhead slide projector years ago, or the bulletin, or whatever your thing is.
Yes.
And I guess I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about, as you've seen churches do, like why should we be careful with that? Because I agree. The same thing. I mean, people would say online church is like, you're forsaking the Lord, and years ago, right? And now, it's like, hey, we should probably figure out how to do that.
Yes. Well, I think, and this was part of the problem of when we went first in this space I remember people got saved and we're like, well, now what do we do? And we're like, I don't know what to do. Maybe we should have thought about this beforehand. But then, because in our church we baptize. Well, how do we baptize somebody that's in another country? How do we, we talk about, we share each other's needs. How do we do that with somebody that isn't right there in our same city? When there's so many things. Now, the reality is, what often we began to find with technology is there actually was solutions. There was ways that we can do fellowship and discipleship online, and we can do aspects of how we do church. And I think it is the beautiful language that we had developed around hybrid church, around every church has an online presence, and every church should have an in-person presence. I believe. I mean, there's maybe the very few exceptions that exist only online. But the reality is every church has some level of online. And I think it's a matter of your comfort zone or your preference or your mission as to how much online is going to affect that. And I think you've got to lean into that. But I think too, the other, issue that I see with technology adoption is that we're so slow to adopt. And then when we adopt, we're frustrated that it didn't work like it did for the people that adopted early. And the reality is when you adopt, I think about a church now, churches will come to me and say, okay, we're ready to get on Facebook. I'm like, Facebook, that was a great idea 10 years ago. But now it's maybe time to think about TikTok. And like, no, we don't like TikTok. And I think these are, and there's good reason for that. I think there's like AI technology that's coming around of like, look, is this like there are aspects of AI that can be problematic. When I think about metaverse, there are aspects of hiding behind a headset that are addictive and problematic that I think we need to think about. Now that said, maybe you need to be in the metaverse, maybe I don't know, but I think I do think the shift that's taken place that I think is healthy is I see more and more churches saying rather than leading with resistance, they're leading with curiosity. And I think that's the right position, because I think if we just leaned with like, oh, it's technology, so we better adopt it, that's not the right perspective, because there are technologies that I believe are in many ways demonic in nature, or unhealthy to be on. And maybe the technologies are agnostic in general, but the way people are using them, engaging with them, just are not a good use for your church and ministry. So you don't need to be on every technology. And then the other reality is sometimes you need to leave technologies. And so sometimes it's time where it's like, hey, if you're on an old Drupal website, or I don't know, what an old kind of website, CMS might be, but it might be time for you to move to a WordPress or to a Squarespace or, new technology. Or if you're still on MySpace, it might be time to upgrade to Instagram with your social media presence. And so these things are changing, and I think we have to adapt and adjust. And I think part of that, we have to try things, and then we have to be willing to try things and then abandon them, or try them and just even until we try them, we don't know whether they're going to be good for our congregation or not. And this is the tension. And I think about, like, my dad is as pastors of church, about 100 in Texas. Well, he's like, I don't have time to try these things. Can you just tell me? And I'm like, I'll do my best. But Dad, even you have to be present on Instagram and build relationships there and be tinkering and experimenting. And I know you can't do everything. And that's what I'm going to tell you. Like, you don't need to be on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and Snapchat. You need to just be on Instagram. But you need to be posting at least once a week on Instagram. And this is where you can be present and tinker. And it might be a year from now that I say, get off of Instagram and get onto TikTok. But you've got to be willing to adapt and adjust. And so you can't do everything. You can't be everywhere. But I think if we can approach new technology with a bit of open-handedness, that maybe it's forced, maybe it's not, but instead of starting with rejection, I think if we can maybe start with a bit more open-handedness, I think we'll see a lot greater fruitfulness. I think there is a level that's too far when it comes to open-handedness. I just don't think churches are anywhere close to that level for the most part. Yeah. And so I don't see too many churches. I do think the one area that I've seen churches probably overinvest is metaverse. And I think a lot of people during the pandemic were like, oh, we're all going online. Meta is changing into metaverse. We should do metaverse ministries. I just don't see a lot of us functioning in the world of avatars and there being a huge ministry opportunity in the next 5 years. There might be in the future, but I think there's plenty of people on YouTube and Instagram, and there's plenty to be done on your church website before you start building in the metaverse. Yeah.
Yeah. Kind of a walk before you run.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. I think that curiosity piece is really important, because that's one of the ways that you can actually, I think, examine, like, is this, how can we use this? Can we, is it helpful? Is it not? But yeah, so often we just stiff arm it rather than to, like, hey, what would this look like? What are the downsides? What are the benefits? And I think that's really a helpful way for people to maybe change their mindset. Because you're not saying embrace everything, every new social channel, every new, but ask yourself, man, could we use this to reach people? Could we use this? And now I am curious, because we talked a little bit and hit on a few things. But one of the things I know about the digital space is just the speed at which it innovates. Yeah. We were talking about AI a little bit, and I mean, in the last, at least publicly, in the last 8 months, I mean, it seems like it's hit a new speed, and so, like, what are some of the innovations that you're seeing right now when it comes to that intersection of digital innovation and ministry, and what are some of those things that are just kind of on your radar there that maybe you're curious about, seeing how it kind of plays out?
Yeah. I think probably two things that I'm seeing pretty significantly right now that that we're at an intersection of, and one is not necessarily even a technology innovation. I think we're in a social media intersection of where we see this short form vertical video exploding on social media. So we see this on TikTok, we see YouTube Shorts, we see Instagram Reels, Facebook Reels, even Pinterest now prioritizing short form vertical video. And so we're seeing kind of one medium consuming social media. And so I think there's a unique kind of moment around any church having an opportunity to crush social media, or crush basically. People often say like, oh, mega churches can only get on TV and mega churches can only do this. Well, I think at the end of the day, social media has created a level playing field. And especially today, I feel like in some ways it became unleveled when it became a pay to play, especially on Facebook. But now I think there's an organic opportunity again that hasn't existed, really maybe for 10 years on social media. And so I see a really unique opportunity. And then I see some great tools, just software apps that you can do on your phone. My kids are using CapCut as an example to edit videos, and they're having these viral videos on YouTube Shorts that they're editing on their phone, and it's unbelievable to watch. So anybody, I think, can go viral now on social media like we haven't seen in a while. So that's, I think, a unique kind of digital landscape innovation that's happening. The other is as you mentioned, AI. ChatGPT is a game changer, and I think AI is moving so quickly that it can do things like, can you help me create a sermon outline? Can you help me create a waiver for our youth camp, a media release form? Can you help me? And so I think there's all of these unique tools administratively, even ministry wise, that can be a great asset to create efficiencies for churches. I think what AI isn't is a theologian. So I think we've got to be very cautious. We don't want AI writing our books for us. We don't want AI writing our sermons for us. God has given us the unique creative minds to read and interpret scripture and create, at the end of the day, messages for our congregation. So I think we can use AI to give us ideas, to even maybe give us illustrations. But I think this is where that layer of caution is like, how far do we lean in to AI technology? I think the place to start, though, is in administrative. And then I would say in even things like graphic design. It's amazing what I've seen some pastors do to come up with like their sermon series graphic using an AI graphic design generator. And so there's some really unique tools that are being created in AI, and the speed at which they're being created is really exciting to me. Honestly, it's, I run a social media marketing agency. It's going to put me out of business for the most part. It's going to replace my video editors, my graphic designers, my copywriters. And I'm good with that, because I think at the end of the day, we needed to meet a need for the church that now technology is going to replace, and they're going to do it better than we can. Yeah. And I just want to help churches get there. It's not going to happen overnight. But it is, I think the reality is, if you don't begin to learn it, I feel like just like Google, you had to spend time learning how to Google. And then as you got better at Googling, you've learned like, hey, I can find all this stuff on the internet. Right. We should be doing the same to ChatGPT. If you spend 5 minutes a day just typing in questions to ChatGPT, you will be that much further ahead a year from now than everyone else. And the truth is, it's going to save you hundreds of thousands of dollars in doing things either you didn't think you could do, or you are currently doing that or paying somebody to do that you don't need them to do anymore because ChatGPT will do it for you. So I think learning those things right now is that technology innovation is going to have the most significant effect on the church organizationally in the next 10 to 50 years, in my opinion.
Yeah. And I think that's where exploring it comes in. Cause one hesitation I hear from people is the idea of like, oh, so you want a robot to write my sermon? It's like, no, absolutely not. Like you have people that you are shepherding, pastoring. Like AI will never get to that point. Yes. I'm fairly confident to say, or shouldn't. But there's all these ways to use it as a tool and as a springboard and as a resource. Even to just to get your, like, how many of us are paralyzed by an empty page, right? And and the overwhelm of, man, I have all this stuff to create social captions. I have, emails to write. I have, I got to think up how to, run my next volunteer appreciation. It's like,
Yes.
we'll start to see some of this as tools just to get that process started, and,
Yes.
the impact that could make.
Yeah.
But we tend to have a hesitancy to say, well, I'm not going down that road. I don't want, robots to start take over. And we start to have some of these myths, and it's like, and there are true dangers to it. It wasn't too long ago that some leading voices in tech said, hey, maybe we should pause for a minute. But there's also, some good things as well.
There's some great things. And this is where I get excited about a company like Ministry Brands and what you're going to be able to do. And so I think at the end of the day, how AI is going to be able to integrate with your church database system to be able to remind you of somebody's birthday, or and in some ways these things have already happened a little bit, but it's almost going to get smarter of, like this month you actually have, 12 people in your congregation that dealt with, the death of a loved one last December. And so you want to maybe be a little more thoughtful in this season, or it can even give you just insights and understanding to your congregation or needs. It's like a reminder, like, hey, Easter's now 3 months out. You might need to be thinking about your Easter preparations and doing these things. And so AI is going to integrate into so many aspects of our worlds and life. And it's going to, and I think assistant is the right even terminology to it. Because it's going to assist us, just like our, I think about early days of a church secretary, where that church secretary kept things on. Like if you wanted to get anything done in the life of the church, you went through the secretary, because the secretary managed the calendar. The secretary kept everybody in line, kept, everybody reminded of everything that needed to happen. And if that secretary wasn't good, the church wasn't, efficiently run. But I think AI is going to be the ultimate, church secretary that's going to help create efficiencies, that's going to help fill gaps. But I think where we have to lean into, and this is where I think the future, our future is very bright. And I think it's what the purpose of the church is, it's community. And I think at the core, no robot can replace that. A robot can help better design our websites. A robot can help us, process payments and do some accounting systems and create some forms. But at the end of the day, what that's going to free us up to do is to care for people that are hurting. It's going to free us up so that we can better put more time into our sermons and messages, rather than reorganize those forms for youth camp. And so AI is going to be an incredible asset to the church. And I think we have to have a level of understanding as to how it works and how we can integrate it. But I think it's also where I think finding a great partner like Ministry Brands that's going to be ahead of that technology, and you can just lean into the tools they're creating. But I think don't wait, because it's not just going to be what Ministry Brands does with AI. It's every technology is going to incorporate AI into what they're doing. And I think it's going to be a big part of our lives, our daily lives. And so it's, I think I get so excited about it. But I think churches need to be paying attention. Carey Nieuwhof just put out a great article, I think yesterday, a couple of days ago, about it. And he, I think there's just great opportunity ahead of us, that isn't going to replace anybody necessarily. Might replace some tasks, but it's going to make our humanity that much more important. And I think that's what our churches need more than anything, is our human investment.
Yeah. And that is maybe what's happened in the last 10 years or so is as we've adopted newer technology or newer things like social media, obviously like websites becoming, you have to have a website, it's not it's not should you, but there's then this period of time where adopting those things requires a pretty high level skill set, a lot of money, resource, all of that. And so I think what's bright about the future is that the needs to excel in those things. Hopefully AI can help shrink those. So like you're saying, there's more time to actually minister, to actually shepherd, love, serve people, equip people. And I think that's our goal. And the platform that, the tools that we're creating is, how do we actually empower healthy churches, healthy ministry so that you know where your people are at, what they're going through, the you know, as best we can, just what needs do they have, and limit the amount of time that it takes to get that information and to know that, so you can spend more time actually pouring into people. And
yes,
that's one of those things that I think, yeah, I agree. I see a lot of what you see, and it's like, man, I wonder in 10 years, you know, as we look out, just kind of what's there and the tools the church is using.
Yeah. And I think there's times where we're wrong. You know, like I remember I put on a virtual reality headset probably 8 years ago, and I thought, this is going to be huge, and this is going to be huge fast. Like when people experience this, and I still think VR is a really cool technology. I think we're going to do quiet times in a VR headset. I think we're going to do all kinds of neat things in VR, but it's still a ways off. And it takes, sometimes certain technologies take time to mature and to adapt. But I think this is, in social media was one of those. I think nobody knew how big it was actually going to be. I thought, oh, this is a cool opportunity. I didn't think we were talking about like half the world's population on these platforms. I mean, now there's more smartphones than there are people in the world. I mean, you look at the adoption of smartphones, unbelievable of what's there. But then, you know, I think things like blockchain, you know, blockchain has moved slower than I anticipated, and virtual reality has moved slower. AI, though, is one of those technologies that I see probably better aligning to mobile and internet, where it comes to like this just has such tangible use in our lives immediately, that I think it's going to move really quickly. And I think that's where, you know, there's things like VR, like, you know, I wouldn't waste your time, you know, with VR ministry right now, but I would start wasting your time, and it's not a waste of time, but I would start, this is where AI is just, it's right here. It's right here, right now. And it's something we all just need to be paying attention to. And I think it's, we don't want to have another moment like we did in the church, like 2020, where we were like caught on our heels, of, oh man, we got to figure out how to stream our services. And the truth is, streaming at that time was like 15-year-old technology. It wasn't new. We just weren't using it, or ready for it. And so I think, I don't think we're going to be forced into a corner where we have to use AI, but I do think we are going to be missing an opportunity like we realized we were missing when it came to digital media in 2020 if we don't prioritize AI.
Yeah, that's really good. Well, would love to dig in just a little bit specifically with social, for those church leaders listening who are hearing what we're talking about, and they're like, man, I'd love to explore AI. Like you're saying, like, I'm still figuring out how to work Instagram, you know, it might be in that spot. What small steps can they take to be more active and to maybe make some headway towards having that digital presence, using social, and, you know, really taking a step to be able to meet people and use it as a ministry rather than kind of just like constant billboard?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think the first thing, that this is not new to social media, but it's literally to show up and be social. And so the reality is that people connect to people more than they connect to an organization. So you as the ministry leader are actually probably going to have a more significant ministry impact on social media in your personal profile than you are on the church's profile. And so I think you need both a corporate church presence on social media, but you also need to personally be engaged on social media. And when you personally show up, and when somebody posts that they're having a baby and you personally celebrate that with a comment, that means a lot to them. When somebody, you wish them a happy birthday as their pastor, that means a lot to them. And I think too, the other value is not just how you even respond to them, but even how you listen to them. The things that you can learn about your congregation and about your community by just being present on social media and just hearing what people are talking about, seeing what people are posting. You might not like it. You know, it might irritate you how much they talk about politics or how much they talk about, you know, things that you don't care about. But the reality is those are the people God has called you to serve. You need to understand them. And so by listening to them, you can get such a valuable perspective on who they are and how you can better minister to them. And so I think, you know, showing up and then listening. And then I think as you do begin to post, you know, lead with ministry, you know, post, even if you don't have the video editing, possibilities, just post a Bible verse, a text-based Bible verse as a form of inspiration. I heard, and I don't know, the reality of this, but one of the most engaged post on Twitter historically, or engaging type of post on Twitter, is text only tweets that are Bible verses. And so it's interesting where God's word is what it's performing better than anything else on Twitter. And so I think we can show up and post on these social networks without having to be graphic designers or video editors. Now, that said, I think we have a great video camera in our pockets. And so I think just getting that phone out and recording a video is just not as hard as you think it is. And I think I feel like almost every pastor needs to be creating vertical video content on their smartphone and posting it to social media. But if you're not yet even just present on social media, don't get on and just start posting. You need to get on and show up and listen before you begin posting. But it's getting comfortable with that camera in your pocket. And they say, my friend Sean Cannell says this, is that you need to, it takes 100 videos recorded until you're ever going to feel comfortable on camera. And so you better get those 100 out of the way as soon as possible. And you might never post those on the internet, but just start recording them. And you're never going to love the way you look or sound or feel. But at the end of the day, you gotta shoot it. And the more you do it, the more reps you get, the more comfortable you'll get, and the better you'll get, and the more effective I think your online ministry will be, and the amazement you'll have as to how both you can minister to your congregation 24/7, and the number of people you're going to reach. And I just love it when I talk to pastors and they're like, you know how many people came, to our membership class, and they said they found us on Instagram? And I'm like, yes, that's how people find everything today. And so by just showing up on those platforms, we open our front doors to our church so much more significantly. And they are a lot of work, and it can feel like it's a churn that never ends. But I think if you intentionally invest your time and energy creatively and in the right ways, you're going to see a lot of return on that investment.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I know one thing that, especially if churches aren't well versed in the world of social media, digital marketing, right? Like there's actually ways to go about having a social presence without having a ton of work on your plate. And one of those is actually outsourcing some of that. And so I know that you've done some of that work, but what have you seen as some of the advantages for a church in particular in outsourcing their social media?
Yeah, look, I think there's kind of two ways to approach it. I think handling it internally is always, even as an outsourced agency, I'm like, look, if you can handle it internally, do it. You know yourself, you know your brand, you know your people, you know your community better than anyone else can. The advantage to an agency is they're going to be more efficient. They know how to edit videos quickly. They know what to look for. They know what goes viral. They know how to do the captions and thumbnails and all that kind of stuff. So there's positives and negatives on both sides. The other reality is I see, even when it's often done in-house, like, oh, let's just get the teenager, like my daughter, who's good at video editing, and let's get them to do it. Well, sometimes what you get when a 17-year-old is editing the church videos is not what the pastor actually wants. They would rather have that outsourced person doing it. So you got to be just cautious, because this is a public representation of your church. And so who's doing it, who's processing it, honestly, who's proofing it before things go out is an important part of the process. And I learned this a hard way, as I had volunteers running most of our social media at a mega church in San Antonio. And we just had to create new processes because what was coming out, and what we didn't have the right filters for, especially from a copy standpoint. This was 10 years ago, but now I think even in the videos. So I think there's give and take with it. I think at the end of the day, it's probably a hybrid approach of like what you can do internally and what you can outsource. And maybe that outsourcing is a local video editor, or it's, somebody like our agency, Amplify Social Media, that, we can come in and you basically just give us your sermon video, and then we can, chop it up and create all the reels and the TikToks and tweets and all the things. But not everybody needs that, and not everybody can afford that. And so I think too, you've got to look at your budget. You've got to look at your capacity. And I think what every church in my mind needs to be prioritizing right now is how do we better capture our sermon video and audio. And then if we have a good sermon audio and video capture every week, that's a great video for YouTube. That's a great podcast for the podcast. That's our core pillar content. And then we can pull so much out of that for micro content to the various other channels. And so you're putting so much, as pastors are putting so much into their sermon every week. We want to get the most out of that from a media perspective. And then the reality is whatever your video is now, how do you maybe get better lighting to make that video a little bit better? How do you get better audio to make that audio a little bit better, and just constantly getting better? And then also, how do you create better clips for that Instagram reel to get better? How do you get better, quotes to get that tweet to pop a little bit more? I think it's a tension to balance, and I think to figure out of what do we want to do internally, what do we want to outsource, what can we afford, and how do we handle it? Because often outsourcing becomes cheaper when you think about salaries and insurance and computers and all of that stuff. So it's give and take on both sides. I think what we want to do to amplify social media is take the excuse away from churches of, you have an option to get social media done. It's going to come at a cost. But I think at the end of the day, the cost of not doing it is much greater than whatever the cost is that you're choosing to not post on social media. Because I can almost guarantee if you're not showing up on social media, no one new is going to show up at your church, or it's very unlikely. And so I think we've got to have, it's basically how strong of a presence do we have online? And so if we can help you do it, great. If not, and you've got the tools to do it in-house, listen, we have a podcast, Social Media Church, where we just talk about this all the time of, I'm going to give you as much knowledge as I possibly can to do it yourself. But if you can't get it done yourself, we've got an agency that can come alongside you and help you get it done.
Yeah. And that's one of the things with anything that costs. To me, it's you're looking at, so what's the value, right? Like, because you're not just obviously looking to spend money for money's sake, but when you look at actually the value you get, one, for your time now to be used for something else, like we were talking about, more ministry, more time with people, more time raising up leaders, but then also the value of somebody who knows what they're doing with that, right? So you're not paying somebody to learn those lessons over a year or two of making mistakes. I think that, like you said, it's not for everyone, but for a lot of churches, I think it's an option for them to really explore, to see there's actually a really, really good return for that. And the cost really makes sense.
One of my favorite stories or examples is my friend Mike Todd at Transformation Church. And he tells a story about when he became pastor of Transformation about 8 years ago. And he inherited a 20-year-old church that had about 300 people in it. And his first, he felt like calling from God was to go buy new camera equipment for YouTube and Instagram, and that they were going to have a strong online presence. And they're rebranding the church and renaming it. And he spent $70,000 on new camera lights and cameras and all the gear. And those that are in AV know that that's not that expensive, but in that church, that was a 300-person church, that was a huge investment. And it seemed like it was the young new pastor that didn't know what he was doing, making this, buying new toys for himself. And the reality is for the first, he was the one staff member at the time. They had one volunteer creative director and basically a part-time administrative assistant. And he was the video editor up until like 3 years ago. And they were having like millions of views on their videos. But he literally felt like this was God's calling to prioritize social media. Well, now they average, tens of millions of sermon views every Sunday, and their giving is, and you can't promise, like if you get on Instagram and YouTube and buy $70,000 in equipment, that you're going to have these kind of same viral moments. But I will say that I see pretty consistently that the churches that are investing in their digital presence and investing in technology innovation, I see very few of them like, oh, that was a bad investment. I wish we would have bought new pews instead. It's really the ROI can be so significant for your church if used wisely. And I think too, he didn't go buy $70,000 in camera and then go hire an outsourced agency. He spent 70 grand and then literally did the hard work of editing it himself.
Yeah. Wow.
And I think this is part of where it is. And so I don't know. I think at the end of the day though, we don't need gear as much as we used to because our phones are just so incredible.
Right.
Or you can get, like they say, what he bought for 70 grand, 7 years ago, probably you could buy for about $700 today. I mean, the price of gear has dropped so significantly.
It's wild.
But the accessibility of the content is such a massive opportunity. So I think it's an investment, and it's a time investment, a financial investment, and sometimes it's even a reputation investment because people in your church aren't going to understand and they're not going to like that you're online or that you're doing certain things. And I think it just takes some leadership investment to lead your congregation into places that they're maybe not as comfortable in.
Yeah, that's really good. I think that there's again, it starts with that curiosity, but then eventually I think you get to a point where you're like, all right, let's try this. Let's do it. And I think that churches that embrace that, both with digital presence or even like, man, looking at what tools are we using to do jobs maybe that we thought, oh, we always have to use this tool. And you kind of step back and go, okay, what if we had just one platform to do everything? What if we had, all of that stuff? I think that's where you start to see some of that ground taken. So, well, one
100%.
Question we love to ask everybody that we have on here, again, our goal is to empower healthy churches. So we love to hear the thoughts of all of our guests on this question, which is what is one essential component of a healthy church?
Yeah, it's easy. It's a healthy pastor. My mentor is a guy named Pete Scazzaro here in New York, and he has spoken so deeply into my life, and I've just seen this over and over again. Is when it comes to healthy churches are led by healthy people, and unhealthy churches are led by unhealthy people. And I think, and it's not just the senior pastor. I think unhealth can be brought up at any level of the organization, but the whole leadership team has to prioritize health, and I think health is defined in different ways, and you get there in different ways. But I think healthy churches, healthy anything grows. So a healthy plant grows, healthy animals grow, healthy humans grow, and I think that a healthy church is growing, but I think it's not necessarily even numerical growth. We're a part of a church called Hillsong that has gone through our scars and beatings over the last few years. And I can tell you with confidence, our church in New York City is healthy today and healthier than it's ever been. And it's growing less than it's ever grown numerically. But so sometimes there's health that can be, defined in different ways. But I think at the end of the day, we're healthy. Our church is healthy because we have healthy pastors and healthy leaders at the top of that organization. And I think at the end of the day, that's what I think is going to lead to the health of every organization at church.
Yeah. Well said. Well, we like to end with our final five. It's kind of rapid fire. So we'll go through these a little bit quicker, but the first one, is one book that you'd recommend to church leaders.
Oh, I just talked about Pete Scazzaro. So Emotionally Healthy Leader by Pete Scazzaro is the best book for every pastor. It's not a quick read. It's a hard read. But it will, and if you're wondering like, am I healthy or not, read that book and you'll know, how to get healthier. So Emotionally Healthy Leader. Yeah.
I would say I actually was listening to a teaching by Pete Scazzaro this morning on the Daily Office. Anything by him, anything by Emotionally Healthy Ministry is all they're doing. I think he's fantastic. So I love that you said that.
Yeah.
Last thing you listened to, whether it was on Spotify, Apple Music, whatever you use.
I listened to a podcast, the Wealthy Way podcast by Ryan Pineda. And so that's what I've been listening to a lot lately is Ryan's Wealthy Way podcast.
Awesome.
Yep.
We always ask people to be honest on that, because even if it's like they were listening to some of their guilty pleasure, music or whatever, it's like,
I'm not a music guy, so I'm an audiobook or podcast. And so I had to go like, was I listening to an audiobook last or a podcast last? And so it was a podcast.
Nice.
Yep.
what is your favorite piece of technology?
I would say it's probably just my phone. It is,
Okay.
it's always there and accessible, and things it can do are just incredible. And so I love what the phone has enabled me just from a professional and ministry standpoint, to do, because I've leaned into that technology most significantly. So the phone, is my favorite.
Nice. Quote or advice that stuck with you over the years?
Quote or advice, there is a quote from Steve Jobs, and I just moved offices. So I used to have it up in my office. I'd always have the Great Commandment, the Great Commission, and the Steve Jobs quote. And I wish I could quote it exactly. But it basically was that the only people crazy enough, the only people that will change the world are the ones crazy enough to think they can. Mm-hmm. And I just thought that was at the end of the day, with the Great Commission, it calls us to go into all the world, with the gospel. And I'm crazy enough to believe that we can change the whole world, with the gospel, and technology can be a great tool to help us get that done.
I feel like that's a great microcosm, but just based on our conversation, what you had on your wall, like great commandment, Great Commission, and Steve Jobs quote. That's like a good intersection for you.
That's basically my mind, all in one.
Yes. I love that. Yes. I love that. All right. Last one. What is one thing you'd like to communicate to our audience of church leaders?
Yeah, I love it. Thank you for that. Thank you for letting me be on the podcast today. I mean, I think if I could communicate anything, it's to lean in to this moment in technology. I think we are living in a day that is it's moving. Technology is moving faster than it ever has. Ministry, there's not a play that it's like, this is exactly how you do it. It's complicated. It can be confusing. But with this, I believe the challenges you're facing are far less than the opportunities in front of you. And so while it can feel like new and greater challenges, and maybe that is true, I believe that the opportunities are even greater than the challenges in front of you. So I want to just encourage you to lean into the possibilities and the opportunities, and lead your congregation into this new season. And I think you're going to see great fruits ahead.
That's awesome. Well, Nils, can you give our audience kind of a rundown of how they can connect with you, how they can learn more about what you're doing, maybe even investigate, amplify social media, and see kind of if that's something that could work for them? Would love to, give everybody where they can get in touch with you.
Yes, if you just Google my name, Nils, Nils Smith. Luckily, there's only so many Nilses out there in the world, so you should find it on the bald one. There's about 2 of us, I think, on the internet, and so on the bald Nils Smith that you'll find on the internet. And at Nils Smith across all social media, or nilssmith.com is my website. If you want to check out Amplify Social Media, it's amplifysocial.media, and that's our social media marketing agency. And then socialmedia.church is our podcast, where we talk about all things social media and church and ministry. So, we'd love to help. DM me if you have any questions about anything. I'm not a salesman. I am a ministry guy that loves Jesus, loves technology, and loves talking to anybody and helping anybody however I can. So, don't hesitate to reach out if there's anything I can ever do to serve you and your church.
Awesome. Wow. I think your heart really came through in our conversation. And so I appreciate that, and appreciate the value too that hopefully church leaders are walking away with, even just maybe the encouragement to get a little curious about some things and see where that can lead. So really appreciate your time, Nils, and really appreciate you all for listening as well. Whether you listen to this, watch this, tuned in, we really appreciate it. Would encourage you to share this with somebody if you found it helpful. Subscribe, leave a review, leave a comment. We'd love to hear what you think, and we would love to help more and more church leaders and empower more and more healthy churches. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
This episode of the Church Leadership Lab podcast is brought to you by Ministry Brands, the largest provider of church technology software. Over 90,000 churches rely on Ministry Brands for their single platform solution that brings together all the digital tools a church needs. From online giving to websites to church management software and more, Ministry Brands is leading the way in simple to use, innovative solutions, all with the goal of empowering healthy churches. To learn more, visit ministrybrands.com.